Morning. Hi. Hi. Yay. Well, thank you for being here. I'm sure. How many animation students? Yes. Good. I don't care the rest of you. No, just kidding. I care all of them. Okay, so well, thank you for being here, especially this amazing weather that we have today. I do have a couple things I want to point out. And how many are freshmen? You are very needed on the Saturday. Do you guys know why? Everyone else yelled out why. Yeah, thank you. So Saturday at 12 o'clock at Amphitheater, we have our second annual The Undies, which is the underclass screening to showcase a finished film from our class that they have done the year before, supposedly. I'm gonna wink on that. So freshmen, you're very important. Make sure you put it in your calendar that you have to be there on Saturday. And you know why? You know? To vote, yes. Yes. So you guys are juror for the Undies on Saturday. So please make sure you go and tell all your classmates. I will send out a reminder to everyone. So please come, and everyone else, you're all invited. So after the Undies, we will have our reception, the award ceremony at Moe's Cafe at 209. Okay? I promise you there will be pizza because that's what Mark wants. I want to make sure he's happy. Okay, so for today, what we have is Missing Link. How many of you have seen it already? Good, I'm glad you're still here. I actually saw on the airplane, so I have to be here because that did not do the film justice. So what we're gonna do today is we're gonna start the screening with The Magic of Laika, and then we're gonna show the entire film, and then the director and the producer, as well as the head of production, will be here with me on stage and do a hopefully 30-minute long Q&A, and we'll open the floor for questions too. So while you're watching it, think about what kind of questions you want to ask, and that's it. Enjoy it. So it's my honor and pleasure to introduce you guys to Chris Butler, the director and the screenwriter for this film, and Arianne Sutner, the producer and head of production. Thank you all. So, where's Corey? Where's Corey? I'm trying to look for him to get cues. Okay.
There he is.
Hi. Okay, so how many of you have seen the movie already? Okay, but it's amazing to see on this giant screen in the center. Great.
You're my favorites.
Okay. So I have a couple questions. I know a lot of you do have questions. I know Joey has one or that we talked about already earlier. So I'm going to start with one. I have a question for each of you, and then I'll open the floor. So first question is for Chris. I want to thank one of my faculty member. He actually interviewed you here a couple years ago for Paranorman. Yeah, so his question is actually about, animation is such a collaborative effort, and your last film was a co-directing, and this one, you're the sole director, and how different it is in the process, all of that.
Okay, so yeah, I think Paranormal was my first movie. And just having the support of another director meant, it was almost like a mentorship, if you like, because being thrown into something of that scale is very difficult. And I think it was good for me on another level as well, because I'm the writer and the director, I have a very specific idea of what I want the movie to be. And I think on Paranorman, it was good to have someone who challenged all of that. Like every time I had an idea, I had to prove it to him as well. And there was something that was, it was challenging, but it was also very useful to me as a filmmaker. But on this movie, I've become way more of a control freak. So and I just felt more confident doing it. Having said that, it ended up being a hugely ambitious movie. So it was way more challenging in many ways than Paranorman was, just because of the size of the thing. And so I did spread myself a little thin. But it is different because you do have someone to bounce ideas off all day, every day. You have a united front when all is going wrong. sometimes I was craving that, to be honest. Sometimes I felt so alone.
Oh my God, I'm sitting right next to him.
But you know what I mean. It's just a different experience. I enjoyed it on this movie, being able to do exactly what was in my head.
Did you create like an alter ego? Like, so you will fight with yourself and argue with yourself?
That happens normally.
Oh, normal.
Anyway.
Okay, on a daily basis. Great. Thank you, Chris. And Arianne, I have a questions for you. So I also want to point it out that Jisoo Rim, she graduated from BFA Animation 2010, and she also graduated from Master's Program Computer Arts 2014. She's a rapid fabricator on this film. And with that, I just want to ask you a question about being a head of production. You know, the technology evolved so much already year after year, especially that seeing that first part of the story in the water. There's like so much effects and all of that. You know, how does that help with does it become like challenging with all the technology changes, or it's just having fun?
Let's see. A lot of the technology, we are innovating and evolving ourselves. So if Chris brings something, there's something in the script that is really ambitious or outside of what we have done in, say, our past 4 movies. We work with our team of supervisors who've been working with us for a really long time. So they might be the head of rapid prototyping, which just means facial replacement animation, or head of rigging, and our longtime visual effects supervisor. So what we do is usually try to find a practical in-camera solution first, and then if it's not worth our time or energy, kind of the resources, then we look for the computer or CG to help us. And that was the case of this cold open. I'm kind of interested in the other question too, but in terms of, a good example would be on Paranorman. We were just working with these more sophisticated color printers, and we started working with them, and we didn't really know how to work them fully. We didn't really have a solution yet, but we were so convinced it was going to be good that we went with it, while we were flying the plane. We're kind of working on the plane, and sometimes that is fun and scary, and it goes by we're going by the seat of our pants. We come up with a lot of ways of coming up with solutions, and sometimes they work great, and sometimes they don't work great, kind of like what you guys are probably working on in your own film projects.
Yeah, so that's something you're talking about, the process of experiments. Fail, learn from your mistakes, and figure out what's other solution, and can you learn from that process. So that's actually really something important, especially with all the technology. I do have one thing, because since we just talk about outside, is just any advice you have for our students here, as well as their career path. What's most needed now in the industry.
In the animation industry, I think. First of all, we need all of you guys right away. We need you immediately.
Well, finish your degree first.
After you finish your hard-earned educations, we need people who are disruptive thinkers. We need people who are writing scripts and telling their stories. We need people in story. We need everything. We need people whom I don't even know what technologies you're working on yet. And we need people who, in stop motion, we need traditional artists and artisans and technicians as well.
So all of you. Okay. All right. So I'm going to leave the floor to you guys. So I know some of you have questions. So I have Nick and Gabby here on both sides. So just raise your hand. We got to start with Joey, because I talked to him like so much before the screening. So.
Hi.
Hi, Joey.
I'm Joey. So I had a question regarding the subtext of the narrative. So the relationship between Frost and Link, I found at least, was very reminiscent in real life of interactions between the older generation and the younger current generation of today, particularly in the way that Frost tries to refer to Link by Susan, like his chosen name. I was wondering to what extent you were aware of that and took that into account. Because the way I interpret it was that Frost sort of served as like the link between the older generation becoming more aware of the sensibilities of the younger generation.
That is absolutely correct. Yeah, it was a very important thematic element of the movie to me is that you choose your own identity rather than accept what is put upon you by other people. And Sir Lionel does represent the old. He's an interesting character because he is ostensibly the hero, but he does represent a hero who is from the old school. He's from the aristocracy. He is a spoilt white male, and he's a bit of a dick. So he's an interesting character because he has a journey to go on. And I think that was always supposed to be part of the story. So I'm glad you picked up on it. It's always interesting to me as well in that I did the same thing with Paranorman, where I personally don't like in animated movies the sense that everything has to be perfect, everything has to be solved, because that's not real life. And I think that's lip service to current thinking rather than addressing current thinking. So Lionel doesn't become the perfect person. The town where Norman lives in doesn't become the perfect town, but there are steps, there is movement in the right direction, and I think that is a better subtext for a kid to watch rather than some fanciful nonsense that says everything's fine and don't worry about it.
And flawed heroes are the best.
They're more fun as well. Yeah.
Thank you. I think we have someone over here.
Hi, I'm Josiah. I had a question about like storyboarding, specifically for like, is there things that are more specific to like stop motion specifically when you're storyboarding, and also like specifically to Laika? Like, is there things that they do?
Yeah, probably. I mean, I started out in 2D animation. I'm old, so when I first got into the industry, there really wasn't much CG stuff going on.
You notice how they're not.
I know. They're just like, yep, you're old, yeah. But I started out in 2D, and I was storyboarding in 2D, a little bit of CG, but then I got the opportunity to work in stop motion. And what I found was the reason I ended up following that path was because as a story artist, it made me, I think, a better filmmaker. Because in stop motion, you have to be more aware of what you're doing with the camera. If you work in CG, you can fly a camera anywhere, in theory. And what I found, because I think the first feature I storyboarded on was Corpse Bride, and I would have to be really aware of where the camera could go, because the camera couldn't fit in all these sets. So you had to really be aware of where you were pointing it. And the other part of it was if I was struggling to conceive of a scene or a shot, I could actually go and wander down onto the set. And that was really lovely. You can't do that in other forms. So I think because that made me a better filmmaker, it made me think more about camera. I think there is a tradition in storyboarding that's always been prevalent, that a storyboard artist is really a gag, someone who draws gags. And to me, it's way more than that. It's thinking lyrically, it's thinking tonally, it's thinking about composition and cutting and screen direction. And that really is directing. It's no surprise that a lot of story artists end up directing, because they should be, if they're doing it right, they should be thinking about how the whole thing fits together. And I think that's more rewarding. So certainly when I'm looking at story artists for the studio, I'm not just looking for someone who can do funny drawings. I'm looking at someone who understands the basics of filmmaking.
Okay. Hi. Sorry. So I'm really interested in stop motion animation myself. I'm taking a class this semester on it. I noticed in the credits there are a lot of interns. And I was curious about the process of that and like any advice into going into that or.
Yeah, we do have interns, and I believe you need to be a student. So it's a summertime. They're paid nominally. They're great. We have different departments, and people will apply and express their interest in whatever department that of interest, and I think they learn a lot. And sometimes we have a process where an internship then leads to another position and another position, and many of our interns end up getting hired because we're so lucky to have had them. So I really strongly encourage you, and I hope to see you there in the summer. So hired. What department would you be interested in? Perfect. We've got a spot for you somewhere. So, what you see up there are we have so many different sub-departments and something for everyone. So we are building and designing everything that you see on screen in the studio. So if you're building a puppet, we are designing them. We're making the armatures there, where we make hair and fur and casting, silicone, and we also do costumes. And I mean, there's so many like subspecialties that we are doing there, and we have incredible experts from around the world who love to teach what they do and love to work with students and people who are interested.
Yeah, it's basically like a live action studio in miniature. Every job that you have in a live action movie, we have it. It's just on a smaller scale.
I was thinking about that in terms of story too, because it used to be like it's like storyboarding for live action.
Yeah, I like to think of these movies as movies, not as animated movies.
Because you do work with actors on set.
Yeah,
That's right.
and I think you can limit yourself if you try to hit certain notes that you think should be animated. I think I always think of it as a movie first.
That's what we've done with all our movies in terms of including post-production, like sound effects and music. We are approaching it like we would any movie. And I think that's what sets Laika apart a little bit from some of the other studios and what people are doing. And they're doing it so well, but we're just kind of doing a different thing.
And very patiently.
No, everybody says that, and I wish that was true.
Really?
Yes, I really wish that were true. I don't think I'm patient. He's definitely not. That's a fun
truth comes
fact
out.
for this group. I think it's just that a lot of people work really intensely, and animate. It's like a special way of doing stuff, but because you do little mini movie. Each stage is its own thing, so you can intensely work in pre-production and then into shooting and post.
Got it. But I can actually kind of just answer a little bit about the internship program, because Anna, the recruiter, was here a couple years ago, and they are actively looking for artists around the world. So it's not just specifically locally in Portland, Oregon.
Oh no.
Yeah, so she's actually based in Europe. I'll talk to her and then figure out we can share some information with you. But the story I was going to share is that Jisoo graduated here 2010. And when she went to the master's program, maybe not the story you guys want to hear, you guys stole her basically from SVA. They offer her internship that only for master program, there's only one summer. They offer internship, so she went. She had an amazing time, and then she emailed me and said, "I'm not coming back." And I was like, no, you have to come back. She's like, no, I cannot turn down this amazing opportunity.
Sorry.
No,
Oh
it's okay.
God, I pride myself on us not poaching and
No, but you guys trained her so well, so she could not refuse that 1 year opportunity. So she stayed. She took 1 year, but then she came back.
Oh, okay.
Came back.
I often think of people's parents in the equation too.
So she did her internship that 1 year. She came back and finished her thesis. and then she went back to Laika.
Okay, that's better.
Yes. So yeah, there are definitely opportunities, like Arianne said, that there are also opportunities for you to stay and grow within the studio, and Jisoo is like a perfect example. But just don't take a leave of absence. We'll talk if it happens.
Should we leave?
No, please don't. Any questions? Oh.
Hi, my name is Danny. Thank you both for coming, by the way. I had a question about your general pipeline and how it differs from live action and animation. Like, if you could walk us through it. And also, do you have any advice for people who want to go into animation production?
Our pipeline, it's not for the faint of heart, first of all. It's really unusual. I mean, we work in ways that are always trying to get the best performance, the best facial animation. And so our process is a little anti-intuitive. However, we focus a lot at the beginning on story, so that should be fairly traditional for most, studios and some live action. I'm going to really make this go fast, I hope.
Unlike the movies.
So focusing on story, really trying to get that up. Then we get the voices recorded and put those into the reels. And Chris works especially just very seriously on that. We making sure that each sequence is singing and really ready to put into production, meaning invest time, energy, and a lot of money into these things. So we get those, approved. There's temp music happening. We're building and designing armatures that ends up being, for our puppets, but we start sculpting first, and that is the first thing that gets approved, including... I'm not making this go fast, Danny. I'm so sorry. That includes costume design and color. We do color scripts. Our faces are all the faces that you see in this movie. For the puppets are replacement animation, so they can be taken off. We wish we had a puppet here to share with you, and that involves its own crazy pipeline.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because I think. In many ways, the pipeline starts out like any other medium, in that you're building assets, but our assets are built physically, on the whole. So we really do have to wait for those assets to be completed and to be workable before we can shoot with them. We can't. It's very hard to kind of go back, as you can in CG, and kind of fix things. It's not as fluid as CG in terms of the pipeline. We are reliant. If we don't have a puppet finished, we can't shoot, Right,
so it's like if you don't have a Link ready, for example, Mr. Link or Susan, but you've made the rest of the assets, all of the sets, it's as if your main actor, his agent maybe called you and said, he's going to show up. He's going to totally show up. He's going to be there next week. And Chris is like, I'm going to shoot around him. I'll shoot around him. And he still doesn't show up. Then
it leads to a lot of complications. I mean, we ended up shooting a lot more of this movie on green screen, which is not my preference, but because of the availability of puppets, you have to improvise. And it becomes, in some ways, it's more guerrilla style filmmaking in that you have to think on your feet. And I'm actually pleased to hear someone talk about how to get into production because, I've seen it from both sides. As a creative, it's very easy to look at production as the enemy. They're the ones who are telling you have to get stuff finished and when. But as a director, I absolutely wholeheartedly rely on the production department to make things function.
We're making the movie, so not just scheduling it, but coming up with solutions.
And we're always looking for production, good production people.
Yeah, we can have a production intern too if you want.
Yeah.
Okay.
It could happen.
But I think the kind of production people on stop motion, there's a little bit of live action, there's a little bit of like theater production, and also animation production, like effects animation. So if you worked on a Marvel movie kind of a thing, there's some similarities, I think, with what we're doing at the studio from a production point of view. But we're making it sound, I mean, it's actually fun. By the time you go, you want to have everything ready. So by the time you get to the stage, which is all hands on deck, it's like the most expensive part of the project. Everything is ready and all of your questions are answered, and you have had a scout in a location. You know where the camera is going. You know what your actors, the puppets, are going to do. And you take all that guesswork out so that people can do their jobs at the most expensive and critical time. And then we're not reshooting really either. So we spend a lot of time and energy getting stuff right and perfect so that Chris is happy with the shot after it's done.
It is fun, but it's not for the faint-hearted, I would say. You have to be able to, communicate, think on your feet, and work really hard.
If you're working in stop motion, I think, or these kinds of movies, and I think it's true for the people at our studio, we find people who love it, They come from all over the world. They've been shooting animation or stop motion with an intervalometer in their basement, or they have been sewing miniatures, or they work in miniatures. It's something that, you feel like compelled to do, and you love it, and you want to do it at the top of your game because
The
of
passion.
because of what Chris is saying. It is not for the faint of heart.
So unfortunately, I'm sorry. I think we're running out. Frank, you want to ask your one last question really quickly?
Well, it was actually two questions because I'm a
Make it
teacher,
one.
so I get to ask two. Okay, one. I thank you for coming, you guys. Really great to have you here. I'm an instructor here for 2D animation, and but first 7 years of my career were spent in a stop motion studio here in New York called Broadcast Arts. We did Pee-wee's Playhouse and a whole bunch of commercials and stuff. So I got a real soft spot for animation. I mean, for stop motion. But this was, we were in business before CGI. This was the analog days before CGI came out. So I've watched CGI emerge, and then I've watched, Will Vinton turn into Laika and et cetera. And so what does stop motion do best now that there is CGI? What is the mission statement of Laika?
I am ready to answer this. For me, and why I fell in love with it in the first place, is because stop motion ultimately is real light on real objects. And I think what makes it so compelling and so beautiful is the imperfection of it. And by that I don't mean, the movement or the animation itself. I mean the texture, the tactility. It's something that the CG guys spend millions and millions of dollars trying to replicate, that imperfection of tooth on a piece of fabric or stitching, and we get that imperfection for free. I mean, not really for free, but
Especially not if you're an intern. But it is true, and I think our movies, all of our movies, do well 5 and 10 years after. They still look incredibly beautiful. They don't look like they were, made they look like they were made by hand. I think these created worlds that we make, age pretty well, much like me and Chris.
We've got a small stop motion studio that's part of School of Visual Arts. What should we be doing with that studio to get our students ready for work at Laika and stop motion companies now? Do the students work on a short film and do every aspect of that, or do they work? They work on their own, they work on their own films. But for instance, we're just beginning to explore dip a toe into computer printing and the type of.
To me, yeah. It's to aim for something that is achievable within the time. I think when I've spoken to a lot of students in the past, and I was certainly the same when I was a student, I have these grand ideas, and they ultimately kind of don't work out because I'm too ambitious for the timeline and for the resources. So coming up with an idea that
that's the same as 2D animation,
yeah.
By the way, with 2D thesis projects.
Making notes now.
That's that's great, and just the basics. It doesn't matter in terms of how sophisticated 3D printers you have. That's something that can be taught. I think it's the fundamentals. It's filmmaking. It's hard work. It's finishing something that you started. It's knowing where the camera is. It's just learning the fundamentals, and then you can go somewhere that has like more resources and expand on that. Like the people who worked in rapid prototyping and working on that, they're really inventor types and scientist types and artist types, not necessarily like that they're expert in using these printers on their own.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
And I think students who know which part of animation they're most interested in, you start gearing your portfolio towards that as early as possible. You don't just concentrate on that because you want to show a good ground knowledge of everything. But if you want to get into like puppet fabrication, then that's where you should start leaning.
And I think we're always looking for costume people, but it's really people who are problem solvers who can work with their hands. It is not necessarily like you just happen to have an affection for tiny little clothing, which is, also great. Nothing against that, but it is people who work with their hands, problem solvers. We are solving quirky film problems like all day long. That's kind of what we're doing.
I'm sure you all have a lot of little problems in your films you're trying to solve. So take that, make that notes. So before I close, I just want to make a point that this event is actually co-hosted by 3 animation departments. So it's not just the animation, also BFA Computer, BFA Animation, and Visual Effects. Did I get it right? Jimmy was right here. You got it wrong, but that's okay. What? Computer animation and visual effects. Sorry, and MFA Computer Arts and Career Development. So it's actually a really good way that we get to collaborate. And then round of applause for these 2 amazing people.
Thank you.
Thank you for being
Thank
here.
you guys.